Welcome to the SDR DiscoCall vidcast and podcast, a show designed for brand new sales reps working in the world of tech sales. I'm your host, Bhuiyan, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey on the SDR DiscoCall vidcast and podcast. Did you know that you can watch this show live with the guests on YouTube? This show is available on YouTube at happyselling.io. Hello, listeners, watchers, fans, and subscribers. Welcome to another chapter of the SDR DiscoCall Show. If you're stumbling upon this and wondering what is this all about, well, there is a great profession called sales. And within that element, there's something called sales development. And this is typically at the beginning of a sales cycle when sales reps are speaking to prospects or potential future customers, and they're trying to convince them to come on board with their solution or product. And what I like to do is find beautiful and interesting people within this industry to learn more about their stories as to how did they get into this, what have they learned, what have they experienced, to A, inspire other people to come into this beautiful profession, or B, to help them realize that they're not alone. And my name is Bhuiyan, your host. If you're listening to this in your local podcast platform, if you could do us a massive favor by giving this a rating and perhaps share it with your friends, peers, or even pet dogs if that makes you happy. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, if you can make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe down below, because what you're telling the algorithm is that this is good content and it will help us get our reach out to more and more people across the globe. Now, with this guest, this is somebody that I met on a power hour early this year, and we got the talking and we exchanged LinkedIn notes. And I really enjoy this guy's posts on LinkedIn, and he talks about a lot of different topics that float my boat and get me interested. So we got the talking, we said, come on, bro, you need to come onto the show. So guest, without further ado, could you please tell us, who are you? Where do you work? Where are you based in the world?
Thanks, Neil. That's a lovely intro. So my name is John Mason. I currently reside in Plymouth, although London's very much my future, which we'll get to shortly.
Yeah.
And I'm currently the head of business development at Dynamic Planner.
Love that. And welcome aboard, John. Pleasure to have you, sir. And in terms of Dynamic Planner, at a super high level, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we're a software as a service company, and we provide software to financial advisors to help them understand risk in their clients' pensions. That's kind of a blend between the real, what we do, and the marketing high-level answer. Yeah.
Love that, love that. And just for a bit of context, what would be like the typical personas or job titles that you'd be having daily conversations with, John?
Yeah, that's great. It's one of the beautiful things about working in financial services is those job titles and personas are really very varied for such a niche vertical. You know, there are only 5,500, maybe 4,000, 4,500, 5,000 financial advisors that we can sell to, and they would range all the way down from I am a sole trader, it's my job, it's my life, all the way up to massive organizations. So we come across people that are founders, people that are manager directors, they're just manager of people, they are the advisor, they are the support staff, operations, compliance, investment managers. You never get bored.
I love that. So you're talking to a complete different spectrum of different people day in, day out. So that I think can keep things fresh, and I love that. So thank you for sharing. And John, the question that I love to ask all our guests, because you got some taste, my dude. Outside of sales, what are your passions, hobbies, and interests, John? Tell us.
Passions, hobbies, and interests. Music's a big one. There's a few nice canvases up behind me. A big fan of guitar, play guitar. Obviously, you and I have we've sort of connected on music as well as sales as a profession. I actually was lucky enough to get to play the final song at my wedding recently, which was pretty awesome.
Nice.
Big advocate for giving back, mentoring and coaching. So not just in sales, but I also work with a charity that help young professionals get into financial services and professional services from less affluent areas in, for example, Southeast London, a charity called Urban Synergy.
Nice.
I also am the assistant coach at my local Man VFAT football. So we help men, of all ages, typically say between 25 and 50, whether or not you love football, but you sort of maybe haven't got the fitness you once had in your, teens, early 20s. Maybe you put on a little bit of weight and you'd like to, get together, play football, not be judged, score bonus goals for your performances off the pitch as much as on the pitch. They are, I'd say two of the biggest things that I love to do outside of work.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And John, with any of these sort of organizations that you're working with, I'd highly recommend, like, after this show, if you want to share the links, and we can put these in the show notes for our listeners and subscribers if they want to learn more about these things. So feel free to share that with us. But thank you for adding a bit of color to yourself there, mate. So what we like to do at this point of the show is go to our guest's LinkedIn profile. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see this here. And again, if you're listening to this on the podcast, I've just had a thought. You can listen to this on Spotify and Apple, and you can go to LinkedIn. So by all means, go into the show notes on your podcast platform and have a check out on John's LinkedIn profile. So with John, he shares a lot of really cool content, and it's not always just about work, but he talks about mindset and other things going on. And he's also a fellow fan of New Tonic. That's not a plug, but we both love the drink. And that's one of the posts that we cover.
James, if you're listening.
Yeah, James, Mr. Smith, if you're listening, a bit of sponsorship would help out. But if we look at this, like, you've had a colourful career. Like, if we go back to way back in the day, you've worked at companies and organisations such as BT, you've worked at MDC Global, and for the past near enough 7 years, you've been working at Dynamic Planner. And you've done a lot of different roles within that business and grown with them. So, what we like to ask is, obviously, like, in your own words, sir, like, tell us, how did you get into this profession from the beginning and get to where you are today, sir?
Great question. I think nothing unusual. I think I fell into sales sort of. I jokingly said that I woke up and decided that I needed to have a real job sort of in my early 20s. I couldn't continue sort of the gig economy, living for the weekend. I needed a 9 to 5. I needed a salary, not a 0-hour contract and shift work.
Yeah.
And a job came available at my local BT office, which super grateful. They obviously take on people that didn't have any necessarily direct experience with sales. But if you look back at my earlier CV, you'll see there would be definitely transferable skills. I've done a bit of, door-to-door knocking. I was quite fortunate to go out on the road during the summer of the digital switchover, which might possibly age me. So for those of the listeners that aren't in the UK or that might be a bit younger than me and you, analog TV basically was switched off roughly not 20 years ago, but not far off it. So instead of pointing your aerial on your roof or in your attic in the direction of your local transmitter station, you're encouraged to get Freeview boxes or satellite.
I remember this. Yeah.
So real big time. Here's a bit of a irony for you. I was working for Sky that were doing broadband TV and phone for the first time, the trio. And our easiest wins were against BT customers that were paying about £30 for broadband.
Yeah.
And I'd offer all of them everything for sort of like £25. You go knock 100 doors, hopefully get 2 or 3 sales. You learn a lot of transferable skills from that. Working in pubs and McDonald's, you cross-sell, upsell. You learn to communicate with people, active listening, all these things. You don't realize that you take all these things, you start working at an organization like BT. They put you on some sort of training path. They put me through a little apprenticeship to get like a level 2 in sales.
Wow.
Through back then, it was the Institute of Sales Management, which has now been combined with the Association of Professional Sales to make the Institute of Professional Sales. So my relationship with them goes back all the way to the beginning of my career.
Love that.
And yeah, I found sales as my home and then progressed through BT. Fell out of love with BT. This is around the time that their sort of billing and operations weren't brilliant. This is before their merger with EE. We're going back 13 years.
Yeah.
People knew who we were, but they didn't necessarily want to contract with us. So it became a bit disheartening that I do the work and maybe the after sales wasn't as good when it left our office. So I was like, I need a new challenge. I've been here 2 years. Let's go something new. Yeah, I moved to MDC. Completely different vertical, completely different thing that I'm selling, completely different industry. But I think I am the person that if I get my teeth into something and I love it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So very quickly became pretty proficient at this, got to see the world. I went to Dubai, I went to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, different trade shows and conferences, face-to-face with people. Back to those sort of door-to-door sales skills. You have to go to approach people cold, face-to-face.
Yeah.
When's the last time any of us approached anyone cold, face-to-face, post-COVID? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then my career changed to Dynamic Planner. It's for love. My now wife. Yeah, we we decided to no longer be friends I decided I no longer wanted to be friends and I wanted to be in a relationship with her. I had this wonderful epiphany after a gig that I'd performed next morning. And I heard her telling my housemate she was moving to Oxford. She works in the NHS. She took a job up there. And so we did the long distance thing. And then I was like, I've done 4 years at MDC. I need a remote job. And this is before COVID. This is 2017, 2018. So I remember it very well. Before going on holiday with her in the summer, I did 3 interviews in one day. But anyone that knows the Southeast and Oxfordshire, Berkshire and sort of around High Wycombe way, I basically went from Oxford down to Abingdon, down the A4.
Yeah.
Down onto the M4, across to Reading, and then up the A40, M40 up to High Wycombe. Any of the non-UK listeners will have no idea what I've just said.
Well, no. Do you know what? Funny enough, I used to do gigs in High Wycombe and around Berkshire and stuff like that, so I'm familiar with them roads. But yeah, that's a bit of a mission, mate.
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously looking at your stats. There's 800 cities nearly that listen to the podcast. I don't think they're all in the UK, but that was a day of interviews. Like a sort of 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m. sort of scenario. And I picked on a planner, and that was August 2018. Here we are. Global pandemic and everything else later.
Thank you for sharing. And there are so many things I would like to pick upon and kind of revisit there with you, mate. So if we think back to this point of when you were younger and you said, right, I need to get a job, I need to get a salary, and then you had the introduction to BT. When you were working with an organization that's really recognized, and it's a global brand, right? What were those first couple of months working within that org? So you've gone from I need to get a job, I need to get a salary. Then you found that job and you found that salary. What was young John's mind going through when you were learning these things? Where was your mind at?
And that's a fantastic question, Neil. I was really lucky. Although I was working for the conglomerate that is BT, we were working for the local business office, which was franchised. And I think that's a fantastic model that BT created. Because someone creates their business in the Southwest. So our CEO, Richard Gore, looked after Devon, Cornwall and Somerset. And you have to hit certain KPIs during the year in order to retain your franchise. If you're not doing the required KPIs, you're not allowed to retain your franchise. So although I was working, I had the support of the giant that is BT. We had a really nice close-knit office of maybe 30, 40 people. I think they've probably tripled in size now since I've left. Because they've got a lot more territory now across the whole of the Southwest, all the way up to sort of Dorset and things like that. So my team itself was relatively small. I think I was one of 4 or 5 in the team. So I had that protection of, here are my 2 or 3 peers and my boss. And then he's got his boss and his boss. And then outside of we've got other teams. And outside of that, we've got BT, So I was logging into systems as if I was some, gigantic employee, but it's a little tiny office just on the outskirts of Plymouth. And it was brilliant to have. It's almost like a safety net. You're not just thrown into a big organization and you're just a number.
Yeah.
I was still very much a person. They cared enough about the personal development and training of their staff to put us on apprenticeships to get us that level 2 qualification in sales.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember the chap that did the training for us actually he got hired by PT to be their trainer for more than just the Southwest. I think he was based up in Wales. So, they not only did they have the desire to find a training program for us, but when they found the right person, they reeled him in.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And also, you was working within this tight-knit team. You're working within this franchise. You've got this job. They're investing in you. For somebody that was, working in that environment young, I'll be honest with you, when I was in my first sales role, there wasn't any investment. There was training and sales days, but it was here's a call list, here's a job, get on with it. And I was working for a big global brand as well, but I did kind of feel like just another number. I felt like one small speck within a whole large organization. So I think it was really cool that they invested in you. You had a relationship with the MD of the business. But this other guy that was doing music and gigs, how did those two worlds mesh together? Because you've got an artistic guy, because I was also MCing on my weekends when I was doing that job. How did you balance life of, rest, life, doing work, and 2 different worlds? How did you balance it?
Yeah. Being in my early 20s definitely helped. It's a lot easier than being in my late 30s, I'm not going to lie. Obviously, I've just spoke very highly about my time at BT there. Don't get me wrong. It was still pick up the phone, do 100 calls a day.
Yeah.
I have really just given that the best light possible, but it wasn't easy. It was still hard. If you're a young person, young professional in sales, and you become a young adult and you've got your own opinions,
Mm.
if you're like me and challenge people when they say to you, do this, why? Why don't I do it that way? Why can't I do it another way?
Yeah.
I could never have gone into the military as a 20-year-old because, yes, sir, no, sir, jump, how high, when can I come down, sir, is not me. I'd have to go in as an officer because I just like to challenge and disrupt.
Mm.
But how did a young, I say young, I was 24 at the time, 24-year-old John balance? I say balance John and balance John Mason, or Mason. When I was out to my friends, I'm John Mason or Mason because we used to have more than one John at college.
Yeah.
Some people find it very strange to call me John, but at work I was John. Yeah, I was John from BT. Yeah. How do I balance that? Quite difficult. Music's a thing that I stopped to get a full-time job. I was running my own promotion and sound engineering company and putting on gigs and performing gigs. But it just simply wasn't producing the revenue I needed. There was quite a lot of us doing it in Plymouth in quite a small and upcoming scene. There's only one guy left now, and he does gigs across the whole of the Southwest and books pretty big artists. And I sort of look at it thinking, you were a couple of years younger than us. You stayed the course and you have the business. The rest of us went off and did something else. It was still a really huge part of my life. I love to finish work on a Friday, especially if you got some sales in, you were buzzing. Go off and do a gig. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe 4 gigs in a weekend. I remember times at MDC coming back, not being able to type on a Monday morning because my fingers were in bits from playing guitar, acoustic bass. I've gone for anyone that plays guitar and stuff. Gone for playing like 9s or 10s on my electric, 11s on my acoustic because it's a triple O body. Keys on my bass, and both hands are just destroyed,
ruined.
It was. I'll be really honest. Music was more of a priority for me than work. I don't think I actually took my career seriously until I hit my 30s, until the Dynamic Planner. Because although I had a salary job, it was a profession. It was a way of earning money beyond just my salary. I took very few days off during my time at BT because I was very fearful of being able to take time off based on the manager. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, my manager at my next job was a lot more casual. He wouldn't like me having time off, but he was like, if you have time off, I'm not paying you for that day and you're not going to get sales in, so it's your own fault.
Yeah.
So, it took me a couple of years to get back to that point of pride of being without working myself into the ground, personally and professionally, how do I get back to a position of pride where I don't ever cancel a gig and I don't ever take a day off sick? We have to work on yourself, mind, body, and soul.
You do indeed, sir. I can relate on so many levels where I think when I first started my first SDR job, and it's something I've spoken about on another episode, but the main thing was the fear of that company was because they knew that I did music and they were like, is this going to inhibit the work that you do for us? What happens if you continue your music career and you become successful and famous? Are you just going to palm us off and stuff like that? I remember saying to the person back then, I said, me doing music is like a lottery ticket. I have no guarantee that I'm going to win, but I know that I have to play to be in there, right? But I said to him, before coming to this sales job, similar to you, I could be doing 4 gigs a week, right? I was actually at one point, I was working for the local authority in the day. In the evening, I was a Pizza Hut delivery driver on a moped. And on the weekends, I was MC Snibey doing UK garage events. And I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. So I said, I can handle it. I can multitask.
Yeah.
But I was a young 20-something, had a lot more energy and I could handle it. And I remember what used to happen to me, John, was I'd run for a couple of weeks and there was this point where I did it for 3 or 4 weeks. And then it would get to a weekend where I slept the whole weekend and I completely just blacked out. And then the following week, I can then just get back on it. Can't do that now. I cannot do that now. And I'm very selective with gigs. But there is that passion. And I kind of get what you mean where you said music was the priority. And the 9 to 5 helped fund that and make sure the lights were on so you could enjoy your passion. And it's very similar to going self-employed, where they say your side hustle, you have to wait till it earns 3 times more than your 9 to 5 before you can drop the 9 to 5. And that's what happened with Happy Selling. I was still doing a full-time job whilst launching my business and doing here and there like little side hustles and gigs. But thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. The next bit that I wanted to go on to was where you said with MDC. So you said completely new industry, new talk track. What was the world? What was it that you guys were selling, and what was that transition like?
That transition was definitely different. I've gone from working for the gigantic organizations, BT, to working to a company that across 3 or 4 different brands probably has 10 of us. They have grown since then, but it's an operation that you can get away with less bums on seats, boots on the ground as such. It was super exciting. I remember being at BT feeling like it was a shame. In April, I'd been promoted to the education manager. So I was in charge of the education establishment in the Southwest, which then allowed me to start flexing those account management, consultative selling skills that I wanted to do. I didn't want to just be like $100 a day. Fortunately, sales 15 years ago, the SDR role was nothing more than that. There was no thought process behind it. It was just make $100 calls a day, knock on $100 a day. I then joined this organization where I was able to flex those muscles with a consultative selling and and account management. You're spending this much on advertising with us, but it was super interesting. It was like this is a whole world I never knew existed, and it was. Mike is the MDC is Mike Dingle Consultancy. So Mike owns and at the time co-owned, but could possibly completely own by now, 2 magazines that I was working on. It's one of his 5 major accounts. And they were in security and fire, specifically in the Middle East. If you were a UK, a US, Middle East, Asia Pacific company, and you wanted to get into your products, your services into the Middle East, get some of those contracts, those lucrative contracts, especially 10 years ago, the amount of buildings that were going up across the Middle East, in Dubai especially, massive. And now we started seeing that with the World Cup of Qatar. We started seeing more sporting events in Saudi Arabia. So the whole Middle East was on a growth spurt. We were partnered with the largest trade show in the world. And we were like, if you want your products in front of people, we have this subscriber list, print, digital, website. We attend this event. We get to hand our magazines out at this event, work with us. And it was mind-boggling. I've gone from being only able to speak to businesses that were not corporate or not public sector in the Southwest to being able to speak to anyone that sells anything related to those 2 industries in the entire world. I could start my day calling out the Far East at the end of their working day, make my way across South Asia, across India, into the Middle East, and then through Europe. Catch the east side of the USA around 2-3 o'clock in the UK, the start of their working day, move across to the west coast of America. And honestly, a couple of times, maybe I've been to the pub on a Wednesday to watch an open mic night or something. I had a client in Australia, and he knew full well if I was phoning him or texting him, it was midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning in my country. And I was a musician, but I think relationship-wise, he loved the fact that I would actually be like, you've got any questions about the package I sent you over, things like that. Didn't just leave it to email just because he was literally on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Huge difference. And it made me realize I'm not stuck in sales. I can change to any vertical, and I can now go to my next job and say, I've never done financial services and never done SaaS or fintech. But I'd never done that at MDC. I'd never done that at BT. Yeah. I'm here. I've chosen you out of 3 because I want to work for you and sell your product. That is what I want to do. BT, market leader in telecoms. They are the most known. You're never going to get someone go, I've never heard of you.
Yeah.
MDC Global, it was the partner of the event. It was the most known magazine. Dynamic Planner is the market leader and has market share of our tech in the industry. We hold the record of 6 consecutive wins of 1 award at the Schroeder Platform Awards. When it came to 5 years, we thought we were going there just to get maybe runner-up or just a nod. Like, you can't win it 5 times. And then we won it. And I was like, that's weird. And then I saw a message the other day from my CRO. We won it 6 times. I went, no, that can't be right. Like, at some point, don't awarding bodies just turn around and go, Enough's
Mhm.
enough. But evidently not. Look at the Ballon d'Or. Ronaldo and
Yeah.
Messi shared it for the
Yeah,
best
yeah,
part
yeah.
of a decade. So I think moving from one job to another, you can work for a disruptor, you can work for a startup, you can work for a market leader, you can change verticals, you can change things you're selling. If you believe you're selling the best thing ethically to that
Mhm.
client base,
Yeah.
then you will succeed. I couldn't leave the market leader of mobile phone providers to then go and work for a startup of mobile phone providers. I could maybe
Mhm.
go work for a competitor or a partner at that level,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
maybe a disruptor, not to throw, not shade. If Gaff are probably what you would refer to as a disruptor in the market,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, yeah, but I might not go and work for Happy Mobile.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
No,
yeah.
no one's got any idea who they are. It'd be very difficult. Sales is a hard enough job as it is. Don't
Mhm.
make it harder for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I agree, I agree. And you mentioned an interesting point. It's something I'd love to educate the audience on, is about, disruptors. Because that was a term that I learned in my first startup, right? So working at Zora. So the story with Zora was our CEO, was employee number 11 at Salesforce.com. So Mark Benioff's right-hand man and first ever CMO. And he saw this thing called the subscription economy coming. And from a billing perspective, he knew that Salesforce and Oracle couldn't do subscription billing because it was designed for transactional business. And he said the world's moving to subscriptions because you've got Blockbuster, Netflix. You've got iTunes MP for a song, subscription to listen to as many songs as you want. But at one point in Zora, revenue wasn't great, growth wasn't going where it was supposed to. We did get to Series F, and the company did financially go IPO one day. But there was that lull moment. I can't remember. It was either between 2015 or something like that. But he was telling us that we're taking on the big dogs such as Oracle, and we're taking on Salesforce, and we're taking on SAP. And those are the big dogs, and we're this
Yeah,
small little thing. But he said, what you want to be is, Neil, you've got, the disruptors and you've got the disrupted. And he said the disruptors are the small little tech startups that are coming along, and they're there to challenge the big dogs, and they change the world and they change the industry. And he said, but typically most of the disrupted, so the Oracles, SAPs, etc., he said, at first they won't take notice and they won't care because they will see them as small fry. But what will happen is these disruptors will come along and they'll completely shake up the market. Then the disrupted have to take stock and look at them. And either two things are going to happen. They're either going to acquire those disruptors, or they're going to build something to rival those disruptors, right? And he even said, like with Mark Benioff, when Mark gave Teen the 50 million to launch Zora, he said to Teen, go launch Zora and one day I'm going to buy you. And he said, it's not going to happen, right? But we took on the likes of SAP, NetSuite, and all of that, and we blew them out of the water. But being part of the disruptor can be a very fun experience. And you see it in tech and SaaS all the time, right? Because I think one disruptor that I'm seeing at the moment is a company called Fathom. So it's an AI note taker, right? But you've had things like Gong, you've had things like SalesLoft, where they've got
yeah,
this conversation intelligence. But here you've got this free tool that you can connect to your Zoom, your Teams meeting. It transcribes, it gives you all the stuff, and it's free.
yeah,
And if you think about it, other disruptors that have come along are things like Zoom, right? Because I've been using Zoom for like 20 odd years, but with Zoom, it's a free platform to do free online meetings. But back then, you used to have GoToMeeting,
yep,
Citrix, the old dogs, right? But
yeah.
where are they now? They're gone. They got
Go,
disrupted.
go
People aren't
to
buying those things.
GoToMeeting is
GoToMeeting.
still technically around. The
Is
ISP
it?
ISP used to run their webinars through it, and I was like, I was using GoToMeeting at Dial Planner in 2018 pre-COVID,
Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then you're right. It only then became two. It was Zoom or
Yeah,
Teams or
yeah,
Google Meet if you have a native Google
yeah,
suite, but they were
yeah,
basically the only two.
yeah.
And I will still attend GoToMeeting. It's just called GoToMeet now.
Y- Yeah, yeah,
Um, because the ISP, the Institute of Sales Professionals, this week they've just, obviously this week when we're recording, appreciate it's going to
yeah,
go out at a different time.
yeah,
They've recently just moved over to Microsoft Teams.
yeah.
So that's it. I can now get rid of another app off my phone. I can go back to just using Zoom and Teams.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show some age here as well.
Go on.
Browsers.
Mm.
You go back to there used to be multiple browsers. There was loads of options. When FreeServe was the first browser to not have, you didn't have to pay for it. It was a free to use web browser.
Mm.
Go even further, search engines. I remember in school you had a plethora of search engines to choose from. It was Yahoo, Ask Jeeves,
Yeah.
Google.
Ask Jeeves. Oh,
Ask
shit. Sorry.
Jeeves.
Yeah. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, Ask Jeeves.
Yeah.
And Donald Claren, not native Microsoft users, and I've started to convert myself more. And I use Edge now over Chrome. It's taken my entire life of using computers to go back to the Microsoft browser. I've used Chrome and Firefox for many, many years.
Yeah.
And now I use Edge because Edge is basically, it's as on par with Google Chrome.
Yes, with Ask Jeeves and all those browsers, and obviously making the change. Like, this is why I love tech, John, right? I know this is a tech sales podcast and we're talking about tech and tools that we're using, but you've brought back some core memories of some tech there. So I absolutely love that. And as we're kind of coming towards the end of this chapter today, John, one thing that I would love to touch upon, because this is something we spoke about in our intro call a few weeks ago, is around neurodiversity, right? Because I have come across a lot of different professionals in sales where I wouldn't say it's becoming more prominent, but it's becoming more recognized, because I suspect I'm on the spectrum, not diagnosed, etc. But I've met a lot of people that have, autism, ADHD. They've been discovering themselves, working themselves. And again, the spectrum is huge, and I'm not putting any labels as to say you have to be this or these are these people. But as a coach, when I come into coaching sessions and I notice mannerisms or, nuances within people, I love it, because I'm actually starting to see different sides to people and I'm learning more about them. But you did advise that you are neurospicy. You have elements of neurodiversity within your life. Could you expand on that and just tell us what's your story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. There is a spectrum. There's a very varying degree of spectrums. For different disorders. The brain is a really complex thing that I think we are still going to spend, at least our lives and beyond, trying to understand. There are things that we understand today that we just simply didn't fathom 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago around mental health. I think I'm quite fortunate. So another aspect of neurodivergence would be people that suffer with bipolar. So, and you're starting to see more and more celebrities, get diagnosed and come out, and you start to see maybe some of their traits and their behaviors and how that it suddenly starts to click. Oh, I can see that. So it's quite prominent in my family. My sister is slightly a little bit younger than myself. She has bipolar, does really well with managing her condition with medication. Thank you to the NHS. If only the government could give them a bit more funding, that would be nice, especially in mental health services. My auntie has bipolar, and my granddad had it. So that I think I might have possibly won the lottery in not getting it, but I'm not free of something that would sit on that spectrum. Bipolar itself is something that's being further investigated. I believe there is clinical research out there now to sort of determine there is more than one type. Similar to autism, if you go back 10, 20, 30 years, there was just one version of autism maybe. And now autism and Asperger's syndrome and other variations, maybe is the better word, of the disorder and the way the brain works. So diagnosed wise, I do have clinical depression, so I am medicated. The only way I could describe it is my brain just doesn't work. It doesn't produce the chemicals that I need to function, and therefore it will basically balance me out. It kind of, going back to a music analogy, it works a bit like a compressor. It will bring down the highs and bring up the lows, just squish it together. It's not a gate. It doesn't cut it off.
Yeah.
It'll just squish it together. And do you know what? It does mean that I don't necessarily get as much enjoyment out of some of those highs that I might do, but I would take that payoff in exchange for not falling, into the deep lows, because life can just feel grey for no reason. You can have the perfect life, perfect wife, happy, good job, good career, satisfaction, friends, money, all of it. But your brain could just simply not produce the right chemicals and the right balance, and you just don't feel well. And the reason why I'm medicated, if this, I'm not a physician, I'm not a psychiatrist, but if this is any bit of advice to help anyone that's toying with this, someone once said to me, and they wouldn't have been the first person to say it, I've been told this thing at least 3 or 4 times. But it was this once that it was said in a certain way at the right time that just resonated.
Yeah.
If you were diabetic, would you take insulin? And I said, yeah. Well, then that's because your body doesn't produce insulin. You need to supplement insulin. If your body doesn't produce the right amount of those feel-good hormones and chemicals, serotonin, oxytocin, etc., then if you're medicated, stigma around mental health is so great. But people that have a neurodivergent streak in them, whether it's diagnosed on a spectrum, just hints of it, I'm very conscious of saying I don't have OCD because I know how debilitating that can be as a mental health condition. But if things aren't in the right place, I will want to move them into the right place. They need to look right and just, I like things to feel right.
Mm.
We just need to be able to talk about it more, support each other more, remove some of that stigma, and just be accepting that people that do have neurodivergent streaks in them tend to be great because your brain works differently. You see it in the extreme. People that have severe forms of autism become savants and things like that. Play piano without ever hearing it, hear it once, play it, draw something from memory. You take that extreme and you dilute it down a little bit, and you take a typical person and just make some tweaks around the edges. And then you get, they maybe lose some stats and attributes. If you talk about like a FIFA card in football in some areas and gain it in others. Well, hang on. If you've got a workforce of 10 people that are exactly the same, or you've got a workforce of 10 people that are completely different, which one's going to help you get your business further? Going to help you be a disruptor, help you be the market leader, help you run your sales team? It's something to be celebrated and understood. And, that's basically my take on it.
I love that. Thank you for being honest, for being open and vulnerable, and educating myself and with our audience. I really respect you for that, John. And I think, like with neurodiversity, it's something that I've learned more about since I've had my son, who was diagnosed with autism. And Blake, if you're listening to this, Daddy loves you. He always wants me to give a shout out on the podcast because he watches it on YouTube. But I learned like all for it, support it. I have elements of, being neurodivergent, and where my family said, no, you were odd and you were weird. It's those things there, right? But I also have to be honest, where I had a level of ignorance on something where I offended one of my friends. And I then felt that experience with my son, right? So to kind of set the scene, I've got a really good friend who has ADHD. And when we kind of we've known each other since childhood. And then when he kind of said, I think I have ADHD, I was like, okay, now a lot of things make sense about you, mate. Right. So I kind of learned when I was having conversations with him, I had to make sure that I was direct and I kept things concise, and that I didn't go around the houses and storytell about things. And when he used to get annoyed with me with my way of thinking, I just used to get annoyed with him because my mind would go so deep into the detail, the story and all of that sometimes will be clashed on ideas and stuff. But one day when he did something that annoyed me, not by a physical thing, but just his mindset on something, I made the ignorant remark of, well, that's just your ADHD brain. That's the way you look at it. And he just kind of said to me, bro, it's not because I have ADHD that I'm thinking like that. He said, why did you say that? And I said, oh, bro, calm down, man. It's just, that's how your brain's built. And I didn't understand the ignorance from myself. And I couldn't get his point of view because I was trying to say it in a loving way of, dude, that's how you're built. That's kind of where it was coming. That's the place it was coming from. But I didn't understand the ignorance. But when I did understand the ignorance was, whenever, a year or two, whatever later, my son, he kind of had a while out, an episode at home. And when I was sharing that information with a family member, they just said, oh, it's just his autism. And then it clicked. And I said, no, it's not because of his autism. It's just he was being a kid and this happened, X, Y, and Z. And it was only then that I realized you have to be careful with, knowing information about somebody, but not using it against them in a derogative way. And it wasn't until I experienced it with my own kid and hearing that, I was like, now I know what my mate meant, right? And it's just, it's learning. And sometimes when I meet people who are on the spectrum, so I've had to learn, the spectrum is so wide. One person that has ADHD doesn't mean they're going to be like somebody else. Somebody who has bipolar doesn't mean they're going to be exactly like that bipolar person. So what I've now done is I try to take an interest in learning about, so what does it mean? What's the makeup behind that? And rather than looking at the differences of, you're like this, I try to look for the similarities, and learn upon those and then share that information, because I think by sharing that knowledge, that's where you're able to connect with more people. And I think for myself, when my mates are just like, well, Neil, why are you so weird in that sort of way? And I said, actually, it's because I look at things in a different way and I look at the detail, and sometimes I can get obsessed into things. But I'm like, but that's what makes me cool. That's what makes me unique. So I try to find those unique elements within people, and I'm geek out about it. I want to learn about it. Hopefully this is helped something with our audience, and if these are things that you've experienced as well. But John, thank you for coming on board today, sharing your story. And a question that I'd always love to ask people, John, is if you were to go back to that young John Mason who was just thinking, right, I need to get a job, need to get a career, need to get a salary, what 3 bits of advice would you give to that young man?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is one of my favorite things about your podcast. And this is the first thing that I did was prepare these questions. Just before I answer it, the story you just told, though, about that ignorance had the exact same thing with depression. As a teenager, I had a friend who was in the emo phase when we were teenagers, My Chemical Romance.
Yeah, I
And
remember
I
that.
lost a parent young. So when they said they were depressed, I was like, what have you got to be depressed about? Your life is fine.
Mm,
Said that as a teenager, 16-year-old. And then fast forward 8 years later when I'm getting diagnosed, like, oh, light bulb.
yeah, it makes
I
sense.
know exactly
Yeah,
where you're coming from.
yeah.
And that ties nicely into my 3 things. The first thing is something that I say quite frequently whenever I'm talking about myself, professionally or personally. You all know this from being an MC. There's a
Mm,
persona. Neil at home is different to
yep,
Neil at work, who is different to
yep,
Neil as an MC.
yep.
I sort of say, like, I've got John Mason, and Mason. I'm not Jacqueline Hyde. I just need
Mm,
to bring a different energy. There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And when I say this,
mm.
I jokingly say, and I dance on that line daily. Confidence and arrogance. Be confident is to know your strengths and accept your weaknesses. Be prepared to give yourself, be humble, but be prepared to give yourself a pat on the back. That'll also help you if you have imposter syndrome
Mm,
as well. So that's really key. It's okay to be unrehearsed, just not unprepared. So I recently did my wedding speech, and I didn't actually write my wedding speech down. I just wrote a few key
mm.
words down at midnight the night before on a bit of pen and paper, which I had with me, which I quickly opened to the first page of this notebook as I'm grabbing the glass to raise a toast to make sure I hadn't missed anything. And the things that I'd missed were things that I put there to fill time if I accidentally spoke at 1,000 miles an hour. Because if I cannot speak to a room of people that I know, that I can see in front of me, my friends and my family and my wife's family, I cannot speak
Mm.
about my life and how I got here, and I cannot speak about my wife, then I need to be sacked and divorced. So being unprepared is not the same as being, is not the same as being unrehearsed. You can be unrehearsed, just do not be unprepared, because if you fail to prepare, you will prepare to fail. Exactly that. And that caught me in an interview. I was a shoe-in for an interview when I was looking for the dynamic planner job. The guy wanted my boss wanted to hire me. I went to do the interview with the CEO, didn't prepare enough. And he went, how dare you waste my
Mm,
time not being prepared for this interview? And
mm.
never again will I make that mistake, especially if I ever get an opportunity to be a shoe-in in another role.
Yeah.
Third and final one, I take this from, again, with me, things might have been said to me 3 or 4 times, but it's the one time that it resonated and it clicked that I remember. So if you've said this to me before, 18, and I'm going to give credit to someone else, sorry, but we are all lifetime learners, something that my CEO said.
Mm,
Ben Goss, CEO of Dynamic Planner, founded Dynamic Planner over 20 years ago now. Really inspirational speaker, motivator, true CEO, if I'm honest, but also
mm,
true salesman at heart, likes to control things, doesn't like to give it up, but he has to trust his C-suite to run their operations, and he has to bring that together. I'm sure that's been a learning career for him, a learning curve, sorry, for him. But we are all lifetime learners. You can learn from people below you in their career, people at your level, peers, people above you.
yep.
Cristiano Ronaldo is coached, not
Mm,
by someone better than him at football.
mm,
And he's arguably one of the best footballers, or was one of the best footballers at the time in the world. So, fine line between confidence and arrogance. Um, there is a lifetime of learning ahead of all of us. That's really key. And it's okay to be unrehearsed. Just don't be unprepared.
love that. John Mason, absolute golden wisdom and nuggets dropped in there. So I absolutely enjoyed that. So thank you so much for sharing. And for our listeners, watchers, fans, and subscribers, thank you for joining us on John's chapter today. If you're listening to this again on your local podcast platform, please give it a rating. Please share it with somebody else because this is helping with the algorithm to get John's story out there. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe down below. Share this with your peers, share this with the audience. Hopefully these topics have resonated with you today. If you've got any comments to add in, please drop them down here on YouTube. But again, John's LinkedIn profile will be within the show notes. So if you want to pick his brain, connect with him, learn more about himself and at Dynamic Planner, feel free to reach out. But John, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. I wish you an awesome weekend, sir. Hopefully one day, well, fingers crossed, maybe I can come see you at a gig or maybe you can come to one of my gigs. That'd be awesome. But wishing you a great weekend, sir. And most importantly, happy selling, John.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And we'll definitely meet up. Thank you very much, mate.